All right. My clock says 2:03. Let's go ahead and get this party started. Welcome to our ninth and final session of our Net Plus webinar series. I'm joined today with some great people to talk about procurement. Let's go ahead and head on to the logistics. So, as you can see, microphones and video are turned off, but we would love to hear from you. The Q&A function is your friend. Ask questions during the presentation, but we're going to be answering all of them after the slides. And actually, I'm just kidding. We're going to be answering them throughout the presentation. Usually it's the opposite. So today's event will be recorded and made available on our YouTube channel, our wiki page for procurement, as well as our Discover the Power of Net Plus series blog. So we have some awesome speakers here today, and I'm going to hand it off to Sean O'Brien.
Thanks, Jenna. Hi, everyone, and thanks for coming to the webinar today. My name's Sean O'Brien. I head up Internet 2's Net Plus program and some of the other cloud activities we have at Internet 2, and am joined by my colleague and team member, Sue Gavazzi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sue Gavazzi. I'm the cloud contract analyst with Internet 2's Net Plus program. Also joining us today will be Bobby Clark from Clemson University.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here. I'm great to have this conversation about procurement and how it can help you realize your goals at your university.
And Emily Perry from the University of Arizona.
Hi, nice to be here. Thanks so much for having me to help talk about procurement with Internet 2.
Sean, I guess we're ready now.
Yeah, we'll take it over. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about Net Plus services and the Net Plus program, some of the benefits and some of the support we provide through that program for procurement professionals. So we'll take the first, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes of the webinar and the call today on that. And then we want to shift into some of the community activities and projects that we have related to procurement, vendor management, and some of the issues that the community is dealing with as the supplier marketplace and ecosystem continues to evolve. So Bobby and Emily will join us to talk a little bit about BPLAC, which is our Business Procurement and Legal Advisory Committee, a vendor management framework overview and process that Emily and a group of community members have been working on, a little bit about our Cloud Scorecard project, and we'll finish with some resources to talk about. But first, just to set the groundwork, let's talk a little bit about the Net Plus program here at Internet 2. So the Net Plus program, if we go to the next slide, was really started to help universities, research and higher education institutions broadly acquire and make the best use of cloud services as possible. Net Plus is a community project where we work collaboratively with institutions across the United States to evaluate and vet commercially available cloud services to ensure they meet the unique needs of the research and higher education community. And we do that by looking at things like the services feature functionality, technical integration with other services and community cyber infrastructure, security and compliance, the pricing related to the service, contract terms, and finally deployment. In the Net Plus program today, we're really thinking about these 8 categories when we think about how do we look at the services in our portfolio. Terms and pricing, managing vendors at national scale, building peer communities of practice across those services, thinking about the importance of accessibility and making sure services are accessible, driving speed to deployment for the R&E community, looking at the importance of security and cybersecurity, ensuring services are fully vetted and that they're integrated. So when I think about what makes the Net Plus program and the services in the Net Plus program unique, there are so many organizations out there right now that offer up cloud contracts and make cloud contracts available to their membership. So I want to talk a little bit about how are we unique? What are some of the things we do in the NET Plus program for the NET Plus services that may look a little different? And the first thing is every service in the NET Plus portfolio is developed and goes through what we call a service evaluation process. That process is led by at least 5 research and higher education institutions that are looking at the services in the portfolio across all of the areas we just talked about on the previous slide, to make sure that the services meet the needs of higher education, they meet the compliance standards, they are services that will work in our environments and our unique environments. Secondly, all of that gets instantiated into a contract, both a contract with Internet 2 that provides some long-term pricing predictability, but also a customer agreement. And the customer agreements within the NET Plus program, we spend usually well over 3 months, well over 90 days, negotiating those agreements with at least 5 of your peer institutions, going section by section, ensuring we have the right terms and conditions and the best terms that we can get. So when you look at a NET Plus contract, it is often the case that 3, 4, 6 months of work across multiple institutions have gone into that document to arrive at the final point. And we hope that that both drastically reduces the time you all and the resources you all need to put in, but also from our for the service providers, that it reduces their time to sale by having a contract that has already really gone through a really thorough vetting by the research and higher education community. And then finally, all of the services in the portfolio are supported and maintained by a program manager, a professional staff member that works at Internet 2 that has experience in the field, in the domain of the service, and a service advisory board. That's a group of community leaders who have stepped up and volunteered to help us steward that service and steward the program to ensure those services continue to meet the needs of the users and the organizations that are using them. The NET Plus portfolio, we'll talk about this a little bit over the next couple of slides, is a relatively confined portfolio. We try to keep the portfolio around 20 to 25 services, so we can focus on really having a strategic relationship with the service providers that are in the portfolio. So we try to really narrow our focus to a couple of priority areas and a couple of focus areas. And historically, those areas have been infrastructure and platform services, software as a service, security and identity, and unified communications. Like many organizations, both in the community or even at your home institution, we're also thinking about the impacts of artificial intelligence as a next wave technology and what services need to be in the portfolio to support institutional needs related to AI. Here's what the portfolio looks like today. You can see some of the services in the portfolio today. There's over 1,300 active subscriptions that span these 22 services across 500 different institutions here in the United States. So while it's a small portfolio, we hope it's an impactful portfolio in terms of focusing in on services that are really important to our members and the broader research and higher education community and are solving real challenges. One of the things I'm probably proudest of and most excited about in the role I'm in is that over 140 different institutions have volunteered to be part of a service evaluation process to bring these services into the portfolio, meaning over 150 different institutions have contributed attorneys, procurement professionals, identity and access management professionals, people on their cybersecurity team, people on their accessibility team, product owners, CIOs, CTOs, and other leaders to help us go through and ensure that these services are and the contracts associated with them meet the needs of research and higher education. So that's a little bit about what the NET Plus program is. very high level, we're happy individually, if it's interesting to you or your institution, to schedule a briefing, have a conversation, get into more detail. There's also quite a bit of information online. But I want to shift gears into what are some of the benefits of the NET Plus program. But before we do that, it looks like we have a live, a raised hand. I think we're going to ask if you could put questions in the Q&A, or we can go to the raised hands maybe at the end, logistically. So let's talk a little bit about some of the benefits of the NET Plus program, why you might want to use the program. So we're really thinking about 3 areas that using the NET Plus program, using some of these national contracts and national service evaluation efforts can help your university or organization. And it really comes down to 3 things: reducing time, knowing that you have a set of contracts that have been pre-negotiated, that the compliance documentation is done; reducing cost, both in terms of discounting we provide, but not just the discounting, also thinking about all the work that has gone into getting these services into the portfolio, that you can look at and utilize and rely on when you're thinking about adopting the services. And then finally, thinking about reducing risk, having some of the security and accessibility documentation and testing done, but also having a contract with Internet 2 that typically provides multi-year pricing predictability, and contract caps for price increases. And one of the things we've historically worked on in the NET Plus portfolio is not just looking at price and the cost of the service in just a dollars and cents fashion. So great, I can get a 5% discount or I can get a 10% discount, but really trying to strategically think with those institutions that are participating in the service evaluation process, what can we do to reduce the cost of ownership of the service, reduce all the resourcing that goes into it from a business perspective. That may be working with service providers to come up with a licensing model where I'm not buying individual licenses. I'm simply buying a license for my campus. No one's coming back and auditing it. No one's coming up for a true up. We achieve that pricing predictability. We reduce the overhead of license management. That may be looking at how do we leverage the fact that students on our campuses and at our institutions are the workforce of the future, and getting product into their hands is something that benefits our corporate partners, like it benefits us, and working on negotiating free student licensing. How do we integrate things like access to underlying metadata so a service provider is not selling it back to us, or integrate emerging areas like financial operations into service packages? On the infrastructure as a service side, how do we think about reducing the cost of getting out of a service? Internet 2 is very proud to have worked with the community to develop some of the initial data egress waivers that exist in the infrastructure as a service space, so that if you want to move data out of a cloud provider, you're not getting charged for it up until a pretty generous cap. That's really important for researchers. It's really important for mobility around cloud platforms and services. So when we think about the small portfolio that we have, we think that makes NET Plus different. It allows us to really focus on building impactful partnerships with a small number of service providers. While many other organizations do cloud procurement, it's typically as part of a large commodity marketplace of hundreds, if not thousands, of services that those organizations have in the marketplace. We try to be more focused on some of these key relationships so we can really dig in on the key compliance areas, but also thinking about how the technology is utilized, and how do we help the academic and the technical enterprise and the research enterprise at our members best use those services, best advocate for product changes, and best build a long-term sustainable relationship with our corporate partners. One of the other things that I think is an advantage of working with a community organization like NET Plus is when you're purchasing a service through the NET Plus program, you are the stakeholder. Your institutions are members of Internet 2. They are part of our community, and we're taking any of the revenue we get to sustain operations and directly reinvesting that into supporting adoption and best use of cloud in the research and higher education community. That's our goal. That's our focus. When people are able to and choose to buy services through the NET Plus program, it allows us to do things like run the higher education cloud form. It allows us to build services like institutional profiles that help our member organizations find peer institutions that may be looking to do similar things with similar services or have similar activities. It allows us to build communities of practice, service advisory boards, town halls, webinars, joint technology development efforts. When you choose to buy a service through the NET Plus program, you're supporting and sustaining that entire community ecosystem around these services that reduces the cost of ownership of the service and keeps the spirit and the ethos of higher ed working together intact and strong. So we really appreciate it when you have the opportunity to buy a NET Plus service, that you choose to buy it through our organization and help maintain all of that work. I talked a little bit about some of these activities, but how does NET Plus sort of go beyond the contract? We put on events to bring those who are using services together, both in person and virtually. And we support a number of community activities like the Higher Education Cloud Collaboration Call and the HECVAT on the security side. I'm going to hand it over. There are 2 questions in the Q&A. I will. I think Sue will answer these to some degree. But Sue, let's hold on these to the end of your section. I'll leave them open, and if we don't think they're sufficiently answered, we'll touch on them there.
All right, thanks, Sean. So wanted to expand a little on what Sean provided, a really great overview of what NET Plus does, the services that we offer and the contracts that we offer. I want to talk a little bit about what we specifically do to support those of you in procurement roles as you are navigating, procuring our contracts. Next slide, please. So he talked a little bit about how through the service evaluation process, we manage some of the, meeting the community standards for you. So specifically around business and legal requirements, security, accessibility, and data requirements, and also some predictability in your pricing and your contract terms. Those are some of the benefits of utilizing the NET Plus programs and to support those of you in procurement. Next slide, please. We have a really nice quote here from the vice chair, actually, of our Business Procurement and Legal Advisory Committee, Matt D'Amelio. He talks a lot about it talks about working with service providers, as a community in one voice. So that is another benefit of utilizing NET Plus contracts. Next slide, please. So one of the resources that we provide with our contracts is a thing called a contract summary. This document is provided when a service is launched, and it provides some key items specifically for the procurement audience. So it talks about the term length, termination clauses, price justifications, security assessments, diversity and business type of that service provider, whether they participate in the cloud scorecard, which we'll touch upon later, and a variety of other things that are of importance to the procurement community. This document was co-produced with those on our Business Procurement and Legal Advisory Committee. Excuse me. Next slide. Thank you. Another document, resource that we provide is something called a cover sheet. So if you request a NET Plus contract, there's a cover sheet that's attached to the front of it that does some overview explaining what is the customer agreement that you're about to review, and it highlights the benefits of procuring that through the NET Plus program. Next slide. Another resource that we provide is called the Procurement Analysis Worksheet. This is an aid in comparing standard terms from the service provider against the NET Plus terms. This document is not reviewed by a legal counsel, but is produced as a high-level summary so that that will point out the differences between those two contracts, the standard terms and the NET Plus terms, and it provides references to where you can look further into where those items are addressed in each contract. NET Plus has also, based on community feedback, we have initiated more RFP and RFI processes. So once a service provider is awarded an RFP, they then move into service evaluation. There's additional vetting that goes on past the RFP process, but that process does overlap somewhat with some of the requirements that are in the service evaluation process, and that saves time for the community. The RFPs are co-written and evaluated by members of the community. We have typically about 7 team members, and they are from various private, public, higher ed, and research institutions. Now I'm going to pass it over to, should I stop for a moment and see if we have any questions in the Q&A that still need to be answered?
I'll just add a little color on the RFP question, some additional details on that. So when we issue an RFP, Internet 2 is the organization that is issuing the RFP. So while that RFP is written by people who participate in the process that are at, in many cases, probably the majority of cases, are at public organizations, Internet 2 is the issuer of the RFP. Of late, we've issued quite a few RFPs, but historically, we've typically issued an RFP in an emerging technology area where there is not consensus in higher education around a vendor that might meet the needs. So when we are sort of actively seeking a new service provider in that area, I think 2 of the examples Sue showed, the LLM Gateway service RFP, which is a very nascent market and has actually been difficult to do an RFP, because I think what we've learned through that RFP process is much of what we want to exist. Most of the requirements are still in development. We're early enough in that technology. And that's one of the things we think about in the NET Plus portfolio is really what are some of the pain points that would necessitate us to add a service. This probably answers the next question as well. Could I propose a new service? Yes, typically we add new services into the portfolio when there's a particular pain point that our member institutions are dealing with. So that may be an emerging technology, AI being a great example of that, or whether there's a challenge with an existing service provider, vendor, or supplier which may necessitate us working with them to solve that challenge or bringing in a competitor. So typically in the cases where there is a net new technology or where there is a challenge with an existing provider where we're looking to sort of disrupt the market and identify a competitor, in those cases, we would typically go towards more of a competitive procurement. If it's going to really try to solve a specific problem we have with a specific vendor about things like pricing or business model or specific contract terms, we may choose to just engage that vendor directly and not go through an RFP process to really maximize time to resolution to solve that problem we have with that vendor.
Okay, thank you. Bobby, I think we're ready to go ahead and have you talk about NET Plus BPLAC.
Great. So I know you've heard a lot of great information. We're going to talk to you a little bit about what BPLAC is as the advisory committee to what NET Plus is doing. Before I get into that, I just want to echo a couple of things I heard from Sean and from Sue, is that really the strength of what we're doing here at NET Plus is amplifying your voice as a community. And so all of the things that you've seen as far as the efforts that Sean talked about and the products that Sue talked about are really the result of our community saying to NET Plus, these are the kinds of things we need. So what is BPLAC? Next slide. BPLAC is the Business Procurement and Legal Advisory Committee. We formed in the August of 2019. We're 11 members representing various public and private institutions, and we're here to provide insight and recommendations to Internet 2 and the NET Plus program about what we're all feeling as a community and how NET Plus can better react and get better outcomes to that. We have a great wiki page that Sue maintains very ably. As you can see, there's a copy of it there with a QR code. Please visit it, and you can see some of our members here. Emily is a member of that committee, and she's going to be talking to you about vendor management in a few minutes. But one of the great things about this committee, as we all seem to note, is that we have lively conversation on very time-present topics that are really helping NET Plus and Internet 2 understand what our community is feeling through as a group. So next slide. Our goals is to increase the knowledge of Internet 2 and NET Plus program throughout the community and our stakeholder groups, to foster communication regarding and existing emerging contract issues, to assist Internet 2 in developing procurement-related documentation and NET Plus contracts, and to expand our engagement with the legal and procurement community, which I call non-IT stakeholders in this whole process. Next slide. So as a result of that, one of the things that's come up in our discussions of recent years is how vendor management has been applied in the higher education community. So in a few moments, Emily's going to be talking about some great work she did leading a working group and coming up with some stakeholder analysis and a community representative. But we did a stakeholder survey, and so we have some very interesting data that has talked about how that is affecting our community. We had a very small sampling of it. We call it a post survey with 64 people responding to it, but we got some very interesting information, and we have had seminars going over that data, and we use that data to make decisions about where we place our emphasis and impact for vendor management as a community. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Emily to sort of talk about some of the work she completed as when she led the vendor management working group. So Emily, go right ahead and tell them a little bit about what you did.
All right, thanks so much, Bobby. Yeah, I was really grateful to the BPLAC group for sponsoring this working group because when I first joined the advisory committee, we were all talking about vendor management. Everyone wanted to talk about it, but we were all speaking from our different perspectives. There are business participants in BPLAC that were talking about the business issues in IT and vendor management. We had procurement professionals and we also had legal professionals, and we were all talking about vendor management, but saying different things. So we got a group together, and if you could go on to the next slide, we got a big broad group together in the working group. I think it was 15 participants. So we had public universities and private universities. We had big universities and small universities, and we also made sure to keep in mind community colleges, smaller institutions that were not present in the working group. But our main task was to define what vendor management is. And we really found out that it was a difficult question to answer. Depending on the institution, we noticed different rules, systems, staff processes, everything, making it practically impossible to define vendor management, much less suggest any sort of consistent rules or practices for higher ed. So as we were discussing this, we started off by cataloging all the activities that we do from each of these different perspectives. And we found out there was a lot of overlap. So the best definition we could find was that IT vendor management is a coordinated set of activities that an institution uses to form and manage its relationships with vendors and their products. And so since we saw that these were activities, we started by cataloging all of those. Every activity we could think of related to vendor management, and determined that a general framework would be suitable for the higher ed community. So if you could show the next slide. What we found was that all the activities fit into one of these three categories, either operational IT, procurement management, or IT strategy. But then we also had significant overlap. And since higher ed tends to work in silos, we found that this was an area where we really need to have significant collaboration. So if we can go to the next slide, we can look at each individual area. And so here we broke out the different areas and really noticed that operational IT had a focus on the performance of the vendor's product. There are titles of people, staff titles that would generally fit into that area. Of course, depending on your institution, it might be completely different, but these were some samples from our group. The procurement management group, or area of focus and perspective in vendor management, is focused on internal processes, pricing, and sourcing. And then IT strategy is really focused on the relationship and value of the vendor. So at the top, we have the focus. At the bottom, we have all the different staff that could be working in those areas. So if we go on to the next slide, we have some breakdowns of different of those different activities that are in each of these areas. So for example, operational IT, we've got service owners and managers, the technical teams, finance and help desk, and some of the activities that they do as part of their vendor management. Next slide. Procurement management. We've got procurement and purchasing because the group did want to designate between the two. Procurement being more strategic, where purchasing is more tactical. And then contracts and legal, we lumped into that area as well. And then next slide. IT strategy is more the high level. IT directors and CIOs, CTOs, IT procurement, if you have category management or maybe security. All of these leaders or staff members and then their activities underneath there are the more strategic part of vendor management. So I don't know that I haven't. Yes, we do have one more slide. So we did a lot of work on all of this, and that QR code there will link you to our landing page with all the resources. We tried to create as many resources as we could to explain the framework for the different purposes. So the little white table there with lots of colors was our very first attempt at cataloging and organizing all of the activities, but we also have a table in the bottom left there, the blue one, that's a sortable table that you could see. We've had people use these already to start creating new job roles and responsibilities, posting job postings and things like that. So this is a really great resource if you're interested in getting more information on IT vendor management. And then next slide. I've gone out and presented the community framework at a couple different places, and it's gotten it's been very well received. And like Bobby said, we sent out the survey, and there is a need out there for best practices and collaboration on and understanding how other institutions are handling their vendor management. So a new NET Plus community of practice for IT vendor management is going to be starting soon. And the QR code is there. I think Sue might have more to talk about that.
All right, thanks, Emily. Let's go to the next slide. I'll cover that a little bit later.
Oh, okay.
As well. Okay. All right, thank you. Now I want to talk a little bit about the Cloud Scorecard. The Cloud Scorecard is a member driven program that we initiated in order to provide guidelines or framework for meeting the unique needs of the research and education community. Vendors, this is a place where vendors can provide us with information about their services. Can you go to the next slide, please? We have a nice quote here from Lauren about how it is the benefit of the Cloud Scorecard. Can you go to the next slide, please? So what is the Cloud Scorecard? It's a way for higher education community to discover and assess cloud services that meet your standards and best practices. So vendors self-attest to these areas that are of particular interest to the research and education community. They talk about what if they meet certain accessibility requirements, identity guidelines, some of their network and connectivity areas, data security, integration, and some of their legal and business items. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. The Cloud Scorecard is a community-driven concept that originated with members from an advisory committee. By evolving this resource, based on community feedback, Internet 2 has ensured that the Cloud Scorecard meets the unique needs of research and higher education and the vendors that support them. So we will be launching a new Cloud Scorecard website based on the popularity of this resource. And it is made possible by the development efforts of Cornell University Research Data Management Service Group. We want to make a call out to them, and their Information Technologies Custom Development Group. That will be launching, I believe, in January of 2025. So the pilot launched in 2021. We have up to 80 vendor participants, and we will be launching the new enhanced website with a public preview and full release in January of 2025. So you can see the benefits between the pilot program and the enhanced website. We will be comparing, you will be able to compare multiple solutions side by side. You'll see an interface that has all of the scorecards that are available based by the vendor name. There will be a tool on the side of the website where you can click on different features that you are looking for concerning a vendor's offering, and it will filter out based on those selections which vendors meet those needs, so that you'll easily be able to narrow down the list, and then you can drill down into those scorecards and look at their specific responses and attestations. How can research and education community can leverage this? You can check to see if your vendor participates in the Cloud Scorecard by having this symbol posted on their site. You can include a request for the Cloud Scorecard response in your RFIs and RFPs. So if you ask if they are a member of the Cloud Scorecard, we can start to build the recognition of this resource, and it will, hopefully get vendors to also, continue to participate, more vendors to participate in the Cloud Scorecard. You can integrate the use of the Cloud Scorecard Finder into the early stages of your researching technology. So researching your technology, you can use this tool to see what vendors have participated in the Cloud Scorecard and to drill down a little more into what they have attested to in terms of features in their offering. So if you'd like to provide feedback to us on the information that you would like to see on this scorecard, we always take in those recommendations, and any that would help to streamline the procurement process for you. Now, before I move on to resources, I wanted to check to see if we have any questions in the Q&A at this moment. I don't think anything related to scorecard. We can still take questions at the end as well, though. So let's moving on to resources. We do have an FAQ page that is specifically for procurement and folks in vendor management roles. I have the QR code there, so you can go ahead and check those out. If there are any questions that you don't see on those FAQs, please reach out to us, and we can, include those in those question lists so that we can help your peers in procurement. So stay connected with us. We have a mailing list. So there's a NET Plus contracting, procurement, and vendor management mailing list. If you click on that link, we can get you added to that mailing list so that when new services are announced, we push out the contract summaries, information about webinars on those mailing lists, and they are directed specifically towards folks in your role so that we aren't, you wouldn't be getting emails based on technical information. They are targeted for this audience. Next slide, please. And again, we want to invite you to stay engaged. So Emily had alluded to a new community of practice that is going to be launching in January of 2025. We have our initial meetings going to be on the 28th, and we are inviting you to join us in the conversation. So it will be myself and Emily and another one of our participants on BPLAC, Nelia Zonas from NYU. We're going to be hosting that first meeting. We'll talk about the framework again there, and we want to see where we'd like to take, where we'd like to take this, what kind of conversations we'd like to have, and how we can help support each other in our, vendor management journey on your campuses. So I'm going to pause for a moment and see if we have any questions in the chat or in the Q&A box.
I can take the first question about procurement policies only allowing an institution to piggyback off ones that have been issued by public entities or higher education. And I think I see some of my other co-panelists smiling that may have similar issues. I think there's two ways to continue to leverage NET Plus. One is many of the services in the portfolio have many of the institutions that are using the services in the portfolio have issued an RFP for the service and have awarded. So if you are a public entity and you have to issue an RFP for a NET Plus service, we'd encourage you to put language that would allow the RFP to be used by other public entities. And if that's something you're curious about, you can contact us at netplus@internet2.edu. And we're happy to, the program manager assigned to the service would be happy to share with you whether they know of any that are out there that have used that have used that language. That's one option. One of the other things we're also exploring and have done in a couple of contexts. One I know off the top of my head, which is Google Cloud, is as we've worked on putting together the various requirements of the service, we've actually come up with a template RFP for that service. We're typically doing this for services where there's a distributor in play, meaning there's multiple resellers, so you can do a competitive, or at least some states and some institutions can do a competitive solicitation for the Net Plus service across multiple different resellers. And in that case, in some of those cases, Google Cloud being one of the ones that I know of for sure off the top of my head, we've sort of put together template RFP language that has key questions that the service evaluation schools were looking at, but also that institutions may want to think about a value-added reseller in the case if you're thinking of leveraging a reseller. So, not a perfect answer probably, Deborah, but hopefully something that points you directionally in the right direction. I think one of the things we've learned, now that we're a teenager as a program, is it is pretty near, if not entirely impossible, to solve for every procurement requirement within every state in our very diverse country. So we're trying to focus on what we can do while really continuing to devote resources into some of the key areas we talked about throughout this presentation.
John, if I could add just very quickly to that, I think there are a number of cases. I'm living in a state that is a little challenged by some of the things he's mentioning. He probably looked at me and saw me smiling and realized I wanted to say something about it. And there are some unique things, and so I would encourage you to look at the means and options you have in your state. For the state of South Carolina, there is a way for us to do piggybacking, and you can look at and you might want to check the wording to see how that works. Even if you don't participate in those products, seeing the RFPs that they have been already put out may allow you to do your own RFP in a similar style. And even if you can't get exactly the same deal, we have something in South Carolina that if it's under a certain number of percentage, that we can bring that to bear and ask them to meet or challenge those terms or pricing later. So I know there are other places that have those kinds of challenges. And so I would look for you to look to your state to see what kind of options you might have in your area.
Any other questions from the crowd? We'll give it another minute. Let's see. Sean, Sue, Bobby, Emily, any last parting words before I show our last slide and say a big thank you again?
I just want to say sort of publicly how much I appreciate Sean and Sue and Emily's work and allowing Emily to do the great work she did in the working group. Because when I started on this journey, there was nothing that told you what vendor managed was in higher education. And now I feel like there's at least a starting point for people who are trying to make this challenge or adapt their own processes to have some information that is really best practice, gives them kind of a way to look through some of these problems that are not easily deciphered when you don't have information in front of you. And so I think this is a great starting point, and I really thank Emily for what she did. I think she deserves a lot of credit for what she did to lead us.
That's sweet of you, Bobby. Thank you. I just appreciate all the support that Internet 2 and that you and through BPLAC has gave so that we could do that work. I've been kind of shocked at how many people have responded positively to the community framework and wanted to talk more about it and want to talk more about vendor management in general. So I'm really excited for this community of practice because, as Deborah said and Sean echoed, like it's impossible to cover everyone's procurement needs, but coming together as a community, we can at least brainstorm together and hopefully help collaborate to solve each other's issues just help each other, because that's what we are. We are a community. And I really appreciate that aspect of internet too. So thank you.
Thank you. That was really nice too, Emily. I am very excited about launching the Community of Practice in January. I don't believe that there's anything out there that's like this. It will be community driven. It will be just for higher ed and research entities. There will be no service providers that will participate in this community, and we'll see where it goes. Very excited. Please reach out to us if you're interested in joining. At least start with the kickoff, and we'll go from there. We'll go on this journey together.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. And that was our last series, or I'm sorry, last webinar of the series. We're so excited you were able to join us. If you missed one of these sessions, they're all on our Net Plus Discover the Net Plus series blog, as well as our YouTube channel. This one will be up there on Monday as well. So if you missed anything, you want to go back, you want to scan the QR code, we'll have these slides ready for you and the video up for you as well.